No. Hi, I'm Tamara Taggart, and I'm so glad you're here with me for my first episode of Unbound, reclaiming the Aniyan, Bokun, Aniogo people's minds. And this is just speaking to the Black diaspora mind. This is a sacred space where we are gathering to remember, to reimagine, and reclaim our deeper story of who we are. Now, there's no accident that you're here. Perhaps you, someone like me, who's always wondered about my ancestry past the transatlantic slave trade. Today, we're joined by a powerful voice in the field of the Afro-Asiatic anthropology, Dana Reynolds Marniche, a researcher whose work traces the living presence of the ancient tribes mentioned in Torah, in the Quran, and also in the Greek scriptures. They're right there in Arabia, East and North Africa, and into West Africa. Her findings speak directly to the memory many of us carry in our bones, even when history books have tried to make us forget. But before we begin, I want to honor the diverse understandings of Aniogo or Black identity, and there are many. These truths may seem different on the surface, but many are part of the same great migration of soul and blood. Some of us trace our lineage to West Africa through the transatlantic slave trade, and we leave it right there. Others remember ancestors migrating from Arabia, Canaan, East Africa, into North and West Africa. Some believe that we are indigenous to the Americas, North America, South, and the Caribbean. They believe that we have been here since time immemorial. That makes me think about how the Twa and the San people, who are the oldest people on the planet, have been found here in archaeology, and that they're still living in Africa. Others speak of a time when Africa and the Americas were one landmass, and family was split across the ocean when the earth changed. Now, some carry the ancestral memory of ancient Israelites journeying to the Americas long before colonization, and many honor the legacy of the Moors, ancient Egyptians, and West Africans who navigated across the Atlantic in pre-Columbian times. Now, I don't believe that these stories are contradictions. I don't think it's about this or that. I think it's more of an and. I believe that they are clues, fragments of a mosaic that we're just beginning to see in full. So today, we are going to explore these migrations, these memories, and the living legacy of the tribes whose names still echo in our languages, in our scriptures, our cultures, our food, our faces, and our bodies. This is not just history. This is homecoming. So let's begin. And welcome, Dana.
Thank you very much for having me.
I've been following your work for quite some time, and your research shows that those tribes mentioned in the Torah and the Quran, and I think also in the Greek scriptures, are still existing today in that Arabian Peninsula.
Well, as Africa.
So, yeah, the first question is about the cultural and the linguistic markers. You know, what have you found in your research?
Well, first I want to say that there's a whole misconception about language related to the ancient Hebrews and Semites and all that kind of thing, Africans in general. People need to know that the Semitic language is actually, most Semitic dialects are found in the Horn of Africa, among the peoples like the Amhara and Tigray and Beli. And those groups are not really separate from the Cushitic dialects. So that's why the construct became categorized as Afro-Asiatic. And those groups occupied both the Near East or Arabia and up into Syria, as well as, the entirety of Africa, basically across the Sahel up to North Africa. So, I wanted to get that out the way, that the Afro-Asiatic dialects are African, and they moved up and they include the Semitic dialects. These among the first Semitic peoples to move into the Near East or Levant were the Natufians. And the Natufians were a group that archaeologists consider Mesolithic people, or just prior to the Neolithic and historical period, that were probably the core group of Semite or Semitic, carriers of the Semitic language. Now, these Natufians were, Negroid. They were Negroid, so-called, having prognathicism and, broad nasal structure and other, so-called phenotypical traits of Africans or sub-Saharan Africans. And the people closest related in haplogroups or haplotypes are, and you can stop me if I'm getting too complicated.
Not at all. Our listeners are very well versed. Go ahead.
Okay. Are the closest related genetically are people south of the Dead Sea in the Goa area, and that was a group of people I wanted to show.
And just before we really dive into it and see the images of the people, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Shemitic and the Hamites. And of course, we have the biblical narrative that these were sons of Noah, right? But we've always been taught that Ham, right, is in Africa, that Ham speaks to the Negro races, but then that Shem is in the so-called Middle East and Syria and all through these people in Arabia. But it sounds like from your research, this is a misconception that both of the brothers, I mean, we know that that families both are going to be Negro people if they're in the same family, right? From the same father.
It's not even that it was just Ham and Shem. It was the whole entirety of Noah's folk, or what in Arabia.
Japheth?
Yes. All of those people were groups that were located in the southern Arabian area that had settled there from Africa within the last 12,000 years.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, that's such a long story. That's why I had to write a whole book about it.
I know. I'm so excited about it. So, family, here, we just want to dispel that myth. Noah was a Negro man, and all of his children were Negroes.
Well, I would personally look at the Noah as an allegory, the Noah allegory, because it's connected to, the Ark of Nu in ancient Egypt. So this is a story that even Oans and Sumerian, these are stories that go back, thousands of years at the time when, like, for example, 12,000 years ago, there was a connection between all this area between the Near East and Indonesia and Africa, even down to Central Africa. There was they had widespread trade 12,000 years ago. So these people all came from the same place, but there were, later migrations of different groups of these people, and that group is basically that came back into Africa, actually came back into Africa.
Okay.
Afro-Asiatic. So a lot of the groups that we're considering, so-called, they used to call Hamitic, and these Ethio-Semitic, Amhara, Tigray, Beja, all those groups were actually incoming back into, across the Red Sea, back into Africa, which is in the same latitude.
So that's what this is. This is about an initial migration out of Africa and then back into Africa.
Right.
Okay. I'm ready.
And the Afro-Asiatics are actually one of the main linguistic groups, and cultural groups, but there were also Nilo-Saharan peoples that probably came also as well back into Africa. Nilo-Saharan speakers that may have adopted the Nilotic dialects as first as Afro-Asiatics. And some of these groups that I'm about to talk about, for example, were the Sonink and Songhai, who claim to come from, actually, they claim to come from the Levites. I don't know if people know that, from the Levites of Canaan, because Israelites and Canaanites were actually one of the same people.
Okay.
And,
From the sons of Acolbi, Jacob.
yeah.
Okay.
And that's a long story, but
perhaps that'll be another discussion. We'll have to have you back on to go into that.
yeah, I just wanted to say that many of the so-called Afro-Asiatic and Nilo-Saharan speakers were peoples that are identical to those now in Arabia that are African or Afro-Arabian.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, the names of African people such as the Songhai and the Zagawa, for example, come from Hebrew names. Songhai or Sugai or Zagai, for example, or Sakai was a Judean clan. So the Zakai was the father of Heber.
Heber, okay.
Yes, and these people actually, even in Berber, so-called Berber myth, and that's another thing. See, it's hard to talk when people don't know who the real people were. But the Soning Songhai are the people that were called Beria or Beribra or Berry. And those
Berry.
Okay.
Okay.
And those are the people that were originally called Berbers.
Berbers.
That is why,
okay.
That is why, and they did at one time occupy North Africa with the Tuareg, the called second generation of Berbers. Veiled people, very tall group wearing the veils, of men wearing the veils. And that's why in America, you had in the legal documents, the Negro is called the ancient Berber. Okay, you find that at least one South Carolina document. So the people knew at one time, previous to the 18th century, I guess, and Orientalism and Zionism, that the original Berber people were, Negroes, people of the Niger.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where the word, by the way, Negro comes from, people of the Great Berber or Niger. And these were the Kanuri Zagawa people who were Jewish. All of them were Jewish, including the Sonink, original Songhai and Sonink. But because we've been taught or Europeans have been taught and have been teaching us that Jews and Israelites and Semites were, them, essentially, not African in appearance or phenotype, it's hard for us to conceive of that. And, we think of all kinds of ways to deny the connection.
Yes, that's what this podcast is about. And by the way, this is welcome to the flagship, episode of Unbound. This is all about decolonizing our minds so that we can get to the truth.
Right, wonderful.
Yes, this is the perfect start.
I'll have to keep looking at it then.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. So I had been showing, for example, you see these group of
yes.
Okay, so these are the children of an area called the Gar, south of the Dead Sea, and this is the area that I was talking about that's closely related to the Natufians, or early Afro-Asiatic people that settled, or populations that settled in the Levant, which is considered what's now called Israel, Palestine, Syria, and Jordan, or the Transjordanian area, which includes places like Jericho, Bashan, and the original or one of the Canaanite territories. And by the way, the Banu Kanana are still in this area. The Garane are known for their dark complexions, and that's why people have tried to say that they're descendants of African slaves that were brought there 1,000 years ago. When people started talking about the complexion of the inhabitants of this area. always
Right.
describe them as Black or near Black people. Black
Mhm.
people.
That's fascinating. Right there that again, this is the colonized mind where the assumption is that if there are so-called Black people, Negro people in an area, that it must be through slavery.
Right.
Any area that is outside of the African continent, it has to be through slavery.
Right.
Fascinating. Yeah.
So you find these types of people who are, like I said, closely related to the Neolithic peoples and Mesolithic peoples of the area,
Mhm.
all throughout Arabia. You find them in South Arabia. Let me see if I can go through and I'll just go through and show where, for example, this I think is, let's see, this is Morocco,
Mhm.
modern Morocco. I think it's, and these are also, this is Algeria.
Mhm.
And the
No.
description of the people there are the same as, and those people were called Numidians and Moors. And they're still known by some of the names that they were known in the medieval period.
No, and they're still there.
Yeah,
So, are these the same Natuvians who, in the Fertile Crescent, started agriculture? Is that
yeah,
this the same
yeah,
group?
yeah.
Okay.
That's very important to know that the Natufians and were Negroid peoples that settled the area. They're still basically the remnants. The other people that are closely related genetically are the Amhara of Ethiopia, which is interesting.
Mhm.
But these groups have been shown to be connected also genetically with the peoples in the Horn of Africa as well as Northern Africa. So all these people that are in just to let you know, they're not really that different than the people that settled further south in the Sahel, known as Soninke and Songhai. These people,
Mhm.
of course, have been there for thousands of years, and they have absorbed non-African people, as we see by, the red hair.
Yes, I see the redheads there. Hmm.
Now they do have people that also color, henna their hair. That's part of the
Yes.
tradition. But
Yes.
if they're very young, we can assume that it's just admixture with, a lot of.
Right. Right.
Um,
Like many of us do. I have redheads in my family. You probably do too.
yes, my great grandmother was called Rose because of her red hair.
Yes.
But let's see. I didn't know. So there are people all over the Near East, for example, in Oman.
Hmm.
Now, some of the Omanis are of African, more recent African descent, but not all of them,
Hmm.
because the descriptions, and that's one thing. It's good to know that what the colonial people stated about who was Arab and who was descendants of slaves, and the names of the tribes that have been there for centuries, which are actually closely related to the names of biblical peoples. These are
Yes.
actually Moroccan robbery corsairs chasing a Spanish galleon.
Hmm.
Okay? And that's not a recent picture, that's a few centuries ago.
So you're talking about descriptions of books that were prior to what, the 17th century, where they're describing these people
So,
as
yes,
Black.
and even this depiction is of Moors and I guess some Spaniards. As you can see, but this comes from something, I think it's dated before the 15th century. Here you see, just as Strabo described the Moors, Strabo of the first century described the Moors wearing bands around their head,
Hmm.
which is still worn by the Black Arab tribes and some of the Black, the Siwa Berbers of Egypt.
Hmm.
This is ancient Sabian. I mean, I can go on and on. That's, of course, Nefertiti. Here's the early Umayyad period Arabs that were portrayed by the Byzantines. And I have, that dates from that period, meaning 1,000 years ago, not
Yes.
recent. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
why you also have, I don't know if you're familiar with the pictures of the recently released from Russian archives.
Oh, yes, the icons and
Yeah,
also Iran as well. We've seen
yeah,
that too.
of the early Christians, because
Hmm.
the people that were early Manaeans or Mayan were the Minim, or the early Christians, early fishermen that settled in the area of where I was just showing you, Jordan, as well as Israel, Palestine. So there are waves of peoples from Arabia, which was up until 600 years ago, mainly a black continent, like just like Diop said, a
Yeah.
Negro place. And there were waves of people that came up in the before Christianity and during the area of Christianity and after Islam. And all of these people were described as black, all of them, all these populations. And you can even trace some of these. Let's see who this is. No, this is just a population of Algeria it's in a place called Biskra. And the reason I'm showing you these people is because a lot of people don't understand them. There was a continuous line of related Afro-Asiatic peoples, Afro-Arabian peoples, or
Hmm.
that lived across the Maghreb or North Africa, as well as into the Sahara and Sahel.
Yeah.
These are this was the land of the Masmuda Berbers, who were based in Morocco
Hmm.
and, and founded the Almohad or Almohad dynasty.
Hmm.
Let's see. These are just blue cheese. These are okay. Back to the Gur, or the area of Jordan, occupied by descendants of the early, not only Arabs but the Nabateans. The
Hmm.
Nabateans were peoples of Kedar in the Bible.
Kedar.
Yeah,
Okay.
Kedar or Nabateans were, so-called Ishmaelites. They came from North Arabia and settled, or actually a lot of them came from what's called Babylon or southern Mesopotamia and back into this area.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and especially the bigger group, the bigger type of people were the Nabateans. Nabateans were known as, bigger groups, bigger built people.
Built a little different from the
The
say
later,
the Ethiopians or the Somalis. It looks like
yeah,
these are thicker
yeah,
people.
yeah.
Hmm.
So you have both types in the Goa.
Hmm.
Um, and you have in Mesopotamia, in the early archaeology, you have these big bone Negroid types as well.
Hmm.
So what's interesting about this area is, or about the Nabateans, is that these were the peoples considered by the Greeks to be the Phoenicians, and they're in the area of
Okay.
the Phoenicians. They and a lot of the Berbers or Tuareg, for example, the veiled Berbers, Saharan Berbers, very tall group in the Sahara and Sahel. In fact, Burkina Faso and all over, I shouldn't even say that, I should say all over West Africa now. The camel riding group of people also claim descent from Canaan. They were always called Philistines and Amalekites in the Hebrew and Arabic sources. And they actually came over from the Yemen when it was part of the Yemen, included everything south of Mecca. And part of that was the land of Canaan or Canaana. It's
Yes.
still there.
You are touching on my next question, about how, in my research, I've been digging around for years here, but that many West Africans, oral history speak of ancestral migrations from the East, just like
Right.
what you're saying, Arabia, Yemen,
Yes.
Egypt, the Sudan.
Yes.
And
And the
so how does this align here? I mean,
problem,
we can look at the people, we can see them,
and the
but
problem is that, like I said, that with Orientalism and the different colonialisms, they wanted to say that the Semites and the people of Noah were actually them, and even made the black people into pre-Adamites when they are not even mentioned in Genesis, to be
Mhm,
truthful.
mhm,
But Canaan was the area of the Canaanite, Banu Canaana, south of Mecca. These Banu Canaana also stretched up into Sinai, as well as this Transjordanian area, which includes Jericho and much of what's now Israel and Palestine, and as well as the area south of the Dead Sea.
So
Okay.
one question, Dana. Um, so you're saying Mecca. Now, I think of Mecca is what, just south of or in Saudi Arabia or
Yeah, and it's
no?
right across from Sudan. A lot of people don't realize it's in the same latitude as Sudan. And then
Ah,
500 years ago, the Chinese, for example, had said that the people were of the Hejaz, the area of Mecca, Medina, and the holy lands of the holy sites of the Muslims, as well as the original Hebrews. But Medina, uh, Jeddah, and Mecca and Khyber, named after Khyber, or the Jewish people, are all described as black by the
okay.
Chinese and by the Syrian, the white Syrians. They said that there was no, in the 14th and 15th century, they said there was almost no fair-skinned person in this region, and that if there was a fair-skinned group or person in this area, they were considered to be descendants of slaves.
Interesting, because oh, that's right. The Europeans were the first slaves
Yeah.
taken by the Moors, right?
Yeah, that was in the West, but in the
Okay.
East, the Byzantines or Neo-Greek, Neo-Romans, and the Turks, who had actually come from Central Asia into Syria and places like that, and Turkey. The Iranians, who had taken over, who were actually descendants of Scythians, who had taken over the original Black Iran or Persians,
Hmm, hmm.
from those kind of people, the Parthians and the other Scythic originated peoples settled in Syria even, as well as Arabia. They were brought into Arabia as slaves.
Okay.
And that's mainly North Arabia we're talking about, as well as the area of Hejaz and Central Arabia. But so Turks, Persians, and not only Syrians, especially Christian Syrians,
Hmm.
they were called in Iberia, they were also called the slaves. Usually,
Interesting.
the slaves. Yeah. Now, those
Hmm.
were the first slaves, but actually, at the same time, there were Central Asians that were being called into Southern Arabia or the Yemen to fight against the Abyssinians who had come back into the Yemen to fight against, the, what were they fighting against? Because this was actually prior to Islam. But these Persian people, or the later Persian people, Farskin Abna, they're called, they became like the earliest Muslims in the Yemen and took over a lot of the land there, became the earliest landholders. And that's why you still have, to this day, you find the Yemen has different, it was a minority of people in the Yemen, apparently up until six centuries ago, because Ibn Khaldun says that the Yemen was a land of the the first zone of the Bilad of Sudan. That was still considered part of the Sudan. Similar for Central,
Wow.
yeah,
Yemen was part of the Sudan.
yeah. Well, at one time Arabia in general was, but yeah,
Mm.
Yemen was up until Ibn Khaldun, which was 15th century,
Hmm.
um, or even was it 15th, 16th? I don't know. But yeah, a lot of these places have been modified more recently by during the Ottoman period. Okay,
Okay.
when a
And
lot,
these are Turkish people, the
yeah,
Ottoman.
a lot
Okay.
of them, not of course not dark-skinned people, but
Hmm.
dark-skinned people that came to settle in North Africa and Arabia in the area of the Yemen.
Hmm.
And the British even talk about how the Turks, they have a book called The Turks in Yemen and how they were everywhere. But yeah, so you see the different demographic changes, the way Khyber was talked about as a place of very small, diminutive people that the men spoke like in feminine voices, and they were closer to black than any other color, and that
Mm.
was the capital of the Judaism in Arabia.
In Arabia. And
Now,
where is this now?
Khyber, which is in the Hejaz.
In the Hejaz.
Yeah,
And exactly where is the Hejaz?
Hejaz
If we were to
the Holy Land of Arabia. It's now in Saudi Arabia. It's across from
Saudi.
Sudan. It's across from Sudan, same latitudes as Sudan, or even southern.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and it's where Mecca is, Medina, and Jeddah, and other places that were very, historical in terms of the early Muslim conquest, or where the early Arabs came from. And that whole area was described as Black, and the different tribes there, such as the Sulaim and Hawazin of the Hara, were described as Black as lava. I mean, I could go through all the tribes, and because my memory concerning that doesn't go away.
So a question, we're speaking about Arabia, and then you also mentioned Islam and Mecca. So where was the Prophet Muhammad from?
He was from the Quraysh of the tribe of Canaan.
Canaan, in
Yeah.
Canaan.
Yeah, well, it was the real original Canaan of the Old Testament. And
Ah,
these people also migrated. There are different places, even in Somalia, many related peoples live. So, for example, the Canaan, Banu Canaan, related to people called Hudhail ibn Khuzaimah, and the Canaan ibn Khuzaimah, or Hudhail ibn Mudrika, who was the brother of Khuzaimah. Okay, so Canaan ibn Khuzaimah and Asad ibn Khuzaimah were ancestors of the Kara tribes of southern Arabia who migrated to Somalia, and many of the Kara clans are still known in Somalia, at least a dozen of them.
wow.
Yeah. So that's why you find,
Interesting.
and the names of the peoples of ancient southern Arabia are identical to those in the Horn of Africa. And many of the people, however, even before that period, as far as 8th and the 10th century and the 12th and the 12th century BC, had been migrating into Africa. And we know, so for example, the Moors, apparently the Byzantines said that the Moors had some kind of statuary in their land stating that we are the children of Canaan who fled before Joshua, the son of Nun. Okay, so Joshua is an Amalekite, actually. The Amalekites and the Cushites are the people that made up, or I shouldn't say Cushites, but they were Cushites. The people called Israelites. Okay, among these Cushites were the Al-Kain, or Kano, or Cani, otherwise known as Kenites. They worshipped the deity Yahweh. Okay, that's where that comes from. But so I'm actually working on a book now that was supposed to be done about a year ago on the Canaanites, and I'm explaining in the book, how all these people were connected.
Yes, there seems to be a real overlap
Yeah,
of the so-called Cushite, the Shemites, the Israelites, all of these people, they were the same people, just
yeah,
different, I don't know, children of brothers and
yeah.
cousins.
Well, sometimes they were even, for example, the Israelites were just early Canaanites that they were called Benjamin. They're still called Benjamin and Hajimel. They're still Black.
Yes,
Benjamin, the tribes of Beli, Aradat, or the Bela and Ardites of the Bible are still there, and in Eritrea.
Eritrea.
All these people are speaking the Semitic dialects of ancient South Arabia. Now, the catch is that a lot of people originally thought that early Israel and Canaan, the first Israel and Canaan, was further north in what's now called Israel. In reality, the Old Testament people were much further south in places like the Yemen and the Asir Tehama.
And exactly where would that be on the map?
Well, the Yemen is south of Saudi Arabia in the Arabian.
Oh, in the Yemen.
Yeah.
That far down. That would be where Canaan is instead.
Well, the Canaan stretched down to that area. Yeah.
It was a part of that area.
Yes. Next to
Interesting.
next to Kush, which is the area of Zabid, according to Arabic sources. So Zabid, or Sabta, son of Kush, that's where that comes from. Zabid is an area, or I think it's a port town, or very southward in the area of Yemen.
Saba makes me think of Saba, the Queen of Sheba.
Sabta and Saba, and Saba were closely related peoples in the area. And these are not names like legendary names. These are names of people that originated. This is the Asir area of the Tehama in Saudi Arabia. So a lot of people in this area are still, African in appearance.
Yes.
The area of Jazan in the Asir, otherwise called in the Bible, it's called Asir, after Asir the Horite. So this is all part of the Canaanite area. This is Jazan again. Let's see, these are just Tuareg.
That shifts the mind a great deal when you take Canaan all the way down into the
Oh,
Yemen. Yeah.
well, the Canaanites were not originally, see, the original Jericho and all those place names in the Bible are in this area, not in the Levant. But they brought their names, like these people in the Gower were in a thousand years ago called Moabites.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
Moab. Yeah, and they named their places after the original Moab, which is also a place in the Yemen. But that's in the book that this is the book. Let me see if I can.
We definitely want to make sure everyone gets the link to where they can pick that book up as
Mhm.
well. Yeah, I can't wait to get mine and dive in.
These are
Yeah.
the Fulani, probably, because you look Fulani to me, your ancestors.
Oh, me?
Yeah,
Um, could
the,
be.
the Fulani. Well, me too. Supposedly I have a lot of mostly Fulani, or
Mhm.
they're also called Wodabe. Now these,
Oh, the Wadabe.
yeah,
Yes.
they actually their culture is closest to the C group of ancient Kerma, which was in
Hmm.
Nubia. But the peoples of Kerma, just like the peoples further east in the Gash area of Sudan, as well as peoples of Ethiopia, actually had similar rock art to that of Arabia. It's considered that some of the people, originally about the 6th millennium BC, there were people that moved into Arabia. Okay, and they were the bigger boned, these bigger people.
Yes.
And then there were also other people of the Neolithic period that are more gracile because they had also introduced agriculture and the grains, and supposedly that had something to do with their gracilization. So you find Ethiopians and you find across the Sahara,
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
lot of the people more, thinner built, whatever.
I was just going to say, I was thinking about the migrations from Arabia into other parts of the world. Um, and I'm wondering, was that area ever green and lush? Was there ever a body of water in Arabia?
You say that the area of Yamsuf, or that the area that the Pharaoh, the Israelites crossed was in Arabia. Arabia.
Hmm. The Sea of Reeds
That's what
going.
some, yeah.
Hmm.
Now these are more, what are these? These are peoples of Sion or Zion in
Ah,
Hadramaut. Yeah.
okay.
In Hadramaut now, there's more than one Zion in South Arabia in the Yemen. But the Yemen still has a lot of, like, for example, let's see.
Mhm. So
Yeah,
politics has really they've switched things around, almost like musical chairs, just switching things around.
that area was originally occupied by these black people they were called Moabites in the 1,000 years ago.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it was occupied by Nabateans, by um, even Israelites, the black Israelites, the original
Hmm.
Judean people were called Kude. And in one of my papers, I go through and show how all the dozens of tribal names found among the Judeans are found among these Kude, these black groups called Kude. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, that many of the peoples of Sudan actually are descendants of these people, as well as of the Sulaim ibn Mansur, or tribes of Manasseh, that occupied, according to Benjamin Tudela in the 11th century, the Haras, or the black volcanic fields around Medina. Okay, so Mansur,
Wow.
these Mansur people were considered 1,000 years ago to be the tribe of Manasseh.
And so you're speaking to one of the sons or the so-called half tribe, well,
Yeah,
Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph,
yes, yes.
who in the Bible were supposed to be what their mother was an Egyptian princess.
No, their mother was just a regular Semite.
Hmm.
I think their
Interesting.
mother might have been, was it Rachel? I don't know, but all of the tribes are.
But in the scriptures, Joseph married the Pharaoh's daughter, and this is who Ephraim and
Right.
Manasseh were
Yeah,
from.
yeah. Thea ibn Her name was Asenath in the Bible, but in Arabia it's
That's
Asiya,
uh-huh,
Princess Asiya, I forget. But
uh-huh.
yeah, but now what the problem, another problem is that the Misra of the Bible is not the modern day Egypt.
Okay.
Yeah, the Mizraim were a people that lived again south of Mecca, where the Israelites were in the same generation.
This is where everything was happening in
Yeah,
Arabia.
yeah. And
Okay.
the Pharaim ibn Bali, or of no, I'm sorry, Pharaim ibn Amalek, were that tribe called Ephraim or Ephraim that
Mhm.
actually did cross over into Egypt, and their descendants are the Tuareg people who still call themselves the Ephraim.
Ah,
And
uh-huh.
we're called, like I said, if you look at the Berber sources and the Arabic sources on the Berbers, they'll say these people are the Amalekites. A lot of people don't realize these people, these giants of Arabia, are literally giants, that the Tuareg themselves are often over 7 feet tall.
Very tall, yes.
Yeah, 7 feet
Hmm.
tall. And in the Dawasir or Dosari, who are probably related to the people, these giant peoples, Philistines, Amalekites of Canaan, are also in that range or the 8 foot range, as were the Ansar, a lot of the Ansar or
Hmm.
the companions tribes of the Quraysh of Muhammad's.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
or
also over there in Sudan, a lot of the people who
yeah,
are struggling in war, those are very tall people as
yeah.
well. Some of the
That's
people
originally
who,
where these groups came from, actually, where the
okay.
Arabians came from. Now,
Hmm.
the ones that came
Sudan.
back into Africa, like the Tuareg, of course, are not
Hmm.
directly from these tall or uh, what do they call them? Newer, Shilluk, and peoples like that, of that sort.
Those are the people I'm thinking of. Yes.
But
Yeah.
the Tutsi, who are also often in the 8 foot and over range, also
Hmm.
claim to have come from the Yemen.
Hmm.
They look more like the Tuareg, the real.
Right, right.
So yeah, so depending on what time you came back and when you went to Arabia, this has been going on for
Yes.
thousands of years. People have
Back
been
and forth, back and forth.
right.
Fascinating.
And
Yeah.
these are Oman. This is Muscat in Oman, which is
Hmm.
of course the eastern part of the Arabian Peninsula. This is the Yemen. These were in the Zabid area, which is, according to the tribe of Amran in modern day Yemen, the
Hmm.
Kush. So Zabid is, some people consider it to be the Sabta of the Bible. There's also Sabteka, and
Hmm.
all those people actually also settled in the eastern part of the Nile in Africa. That's why Strabo said that everything east of the Nile in Africa was Arabia, and that Meroe was occupied by the Sabians. So a lot of these
Hmm.
Cushitic peoples actually are what he's talking about. He also said that the tribe of Keturah settled in this area of Somalia. That's
Okay.
a reference to the Beit Kateri, who are the incense traders still today, like the Afar tribe, a tribe that occupied up until the 20th century both southern Arabia or Yemen as well as Ethiopia. Afar and Danakil.
Hmm. So
So
Keturah was one of
she was, let's see, Abraham's concubine, yes. Abraham.
Abraham. Okay.
So that
So
refers to
that's, oh, I'm thinking of Zipporah.
the
Zipporah was Jethro's daughter.
she was called in Arabia Zarifa al-Himyari, meaning the Himyarite.
Hmm.
She's a South Arabian ancestor of, yes, of the original Midianite peoples. That is why Pliny said that the area of, again, Somalia and Ethiopia was called Midoan. Okay.
Midoan.
Yeah.
Okay.
The word Median actually comes from a South Arabian tribe called Medi or
Hmm.
Madai that came to occupy the Tahama, and
Hmm.
so the Byzantines called them Madiani, and that's where the word Medina comes from.
So this is where the burning bush experience happened in this area
Well, yeah,
in
everything.
Medina.
The Old Testament is actually a reference, refers to mainly Southwest Arabia, as well as
Mm.
the area of the Hajamel, going
Hmm.
toward Oman.
Hmm.
all of the tribes, almost all the tribes of the Torah can be found in this area on both sides of the Red Sea.
Still to this day, they're there.
Yes, the tribe of Esau in Somalia and Arabia,
Mm-hmm.
or Djibouti, they're called Esau. According
Mm-hmm.
to the Arab sources, was the name Esau. Esau.
Esau.
It
Okay.
means goat. Doesn't mean red and hairy. It means goat. Just like Anesa, the male goat, and Maaza, the female goat, or something like that. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you have to know this. That's why I always tell people Arabic and Hebrew, these were the black man's languages. It's really, behooves us
Yes.
to learn these dialects, because if you learn them, you'll see, how not only in Arabia, but in Africa, a lot of these names were carried into Africa,
Yes.
I
It's
guess
fascinating.
yeah,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
modern Egyptian women.
Uh-huh.
This is the Yemen.
And this takes me to, it seems like there are parallels on either side of the Red Sea, because a lot of these names we also see them in West Africa, among
I'm saying,
the Yoruba,
yes,
even the Ibu, the Ewe, a lot
yeah,
of these same names and the same stories and the narratives
yes.
um,
I was
are
trying
on
to,
both sides. So it's the same people.
yeah.
Fascinating.
They came at different times, like the
Yeah.
groups among the Yoruba and Hausa, for example, were related to the Sonic, and they
Mm-hmm.
were they're actually mostly Jews. If you
Mm-hmm.
go to if you talk to them, they'll tell you, yes, we're supposed to be the original Israelites. And the name
Mm-hmm.
Yoruba is supposed to be related to Yarab, or in the Bible, Yurech, but or Jira. It's been translated as Jira, but Yarab or Bayarab was see, a lot of these names are also found in the inscriptions of Southern Arabia, and I discovered some of the Israelite names in the inscriptions of Southern Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
Israelite rulers' names, which is why my book has been called Fascinating by, the top scholars of linguistic. So Brandon Wheeler is one of the top scholars, actually wrote the foreword for my book. He's a professor and the founder of the Department of Middle Eastern Studies at the United States Naval Academy, and he used to teach at Oxford. He's a graduate of the University of Chicago. He's a very prolific author of in the exegesis, or the background of early Muslim and Judaism, Islam and Judaism. So most people who study ancient Middle East know about him. But he said that my book was fascinating, and he also writes, interestingly enough, that this book should be recognized for the singular contribution it makes to several overlapping but distinct fields of research: biblical studies, Arabic, Islamic studies, and the history of religion. This book will be read by people who are not accustomed to accepting the reigning standard orthodox. It is to be credited with marking a significant stage in the study of religion. So, that's one of a group of the top scholars and that have called the book fascinating.
Excellent.
And
You are in excellent company.
yeah,
I know that must feel good, because this could not have been easy, you know.
I
This
don't
is
know.
years of research.
I'm not really. I feel like it's come because I feel like it's the ancestors that are actually doing the research, or
Mm,
leading me to the different research.
yes, yes.
I've had different dreams even before, any visions before I even got into the research as a child, that
Hmm.
led to the Moors, the study of the Moors, and well, I guess reading J.A. Rogers' books, Nature Knows No Color Line.
Yes, that's excellent too. That's a great mind opener.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
other early, you know, people that were specializing in the study of Cushitic peoples, Cushites, they're called.
Mhm. Mhm.
Dorothea Dungy, people like that.
Yeah.
So, but go ahead.
And I was just going to say that, since this podcast is about decolonizing our minds and really getting to the truth, right? You know, there's that idea and the questions around forced movement, you know, how these people were forced to move. I mean, you get your hair braided, you speak to Africans and you hear their stories. And many of them said, we were in the East and we were forced
Yeah.
over into the West in West Africa. And so all of that is like the making of the diaspora. If you think about it, you have those pushings, which I imagine that was from Islam, perhaps.
No, that was pushing those groups being
Yeah.
pushed down south. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was the pushing from the north,
Yeah.
downward.
Yeah.
And that makes me think about what the Black Hebrews and the Asiatic peoples who were pushed out of Spain and Portugal. I mean, you're
Oh,
speaking about Jewish people, then you're speaking about Muslim people, but
but
that they were together during a lot of this time period.
yeah, but no, I have I just want to make the point that in fact
Mhm.
most of the people that were pushed out of Andalusia were not black, and they had little to do with the Black Hebrews in the
Okay.
Sahara. They were basically the people that you see in North Africa that are, little mixed and or whitish in color. That's why you have this difference in appearance. Hundreds of
Mhm.
thousands of Andalusians came down, and they were also um, forced into France and places like that sort. And you'll see people like that with
Right,
deep
right.
Negro type of, but they look fair skinned. They're not dark.
So they didn't get pushed down into, say, West Africa. They were in Morocco.
Yeah, and that wasn't very late. That was after after the 14th century. That was from the
Hmm.
15th. So, for example, Ibn Khaldun, who wrote about the history of the Middle East and all, sociology, that whatever. He used to talk about the Arabs, but he claimed an ancestry, even though he, probably had little to do with Arabs. He might have had some ancestor way back that was from Arabia, from the
Hmm.
Hadramawt, whatever. But those kind of people settled in North Africa along the coast. That's why you see along the coast, most of the people are fair skinned. But you also had a large group of slaves that were brought into North Africa before the 17th century. You had up
Oh,
until even the Tuareg back in the Byzantine period of the 4th and 5th century were bringing in concubines and slaves from the Europeans and Romans because they had a big fight. They were fighting with the Romans. So that's why Claudian said that the Moorish Gildo, which is the name of the Tuareg leaders even today, was bringing in women of the Levant, Roman women from the Levant, and mixing with them, making Ethiopian hybrids across
hmm.
North Africa. That's what
Okay.
we're talking about. Also, the Masmuda were complaining that the Tuareg Mourabid dynasty before them, before the Masmuda dynasty, were sending in Iberian Muslim slaves, the white people, to collect taxes, and these people were coming in and having, intercourse with their women and
Okay.
creating fair skinned Berbers in
Hmm.
certain places.
Hmm.
So the Masmuda, that's the Masmuda used to occupy, the northern part of the Atlas and even the northern plains of Morocco and Tangiers and places like that, along
Hmm.
with the Nada, who are also described as black by Ibn Khaldun. So there's no Berber tribe that before the 16th century was described as, Ahmar or white in Arab sources. They're all described as black or, maybe this color at the most, which is considered white in Arab sources. Or actually, you are considered Abiad or Biad, which is the term for white, the literal
Hmm.
term for white in Arabic sources. And it doesn't mean, the European man. So a lot of times
Right.
historians were interpreting what the classical Arabic writers are saying, they thought, oh, they're talking about white Berbers. When
Okay.
yeah, when the Arabs said that the Tuareg women were white, pure white and fat and the most beautiful of all women.
That.
Yeah, because that's what was, still what is liked in some of those countries. Uh,
Yeah.
that's what they were talking about. They're not talking about European colored people or even.
Got you. So it would have been those people who some of them were pushed down into West Africa
Yeah,
and intermixed and ended up in the slave trade as well.
the Tuareg are what's his name? Who's the guy that played in Robin Hood, the Moor in Robin Hood? Do you remember his name?
Oh, was it Morgan Freeman?
Yeah, his
Uh,
his genetics are Tuareg and Songhai. A lot
okay.
of millions of us are either Songhai or Tuareg and Fulani. Yes, and
Hmm.
those are the people that took part in the raids, also in North Africa up into Spain. Oh, I had meant to show, I don't know.
And these people were Jews
The
originally.
Songhai Sani were mainly Jews. The Tuareg were Jewish and also Christians,
Hmm.
and also Magians. Magianism was a big thing among, I'm just trying to find the picture of even the Arabs that went up into Spain were black. But
That's
the
an important one to really dig into because oftentimes, people want to say that the Moors that went into Spain were the white Moors, but this is not the case.
yeah, I was just looking for the picture of the Makil Arabs,
Hmm.
another the descendants called Trarza in West Africa, that also came into America. Actually, the Trarza Arabs were also among the slaves in especially places like Georgia.
Hmm.
These are now Black Jews of India. A lot
Oh,
of people don't
yes.
know. A lot of people don't know that there were in Benjamin Tudela talks about among the Kushites of India, which is the area of Kerala and the Tamil peoples of southern India,
Camille.
there
Hmm.
are thousands of black-skinned Israelites
Hmm.
because they came over with the Kushites, not to be confused with the Austric people over there, but no, the straight-haired people are not
So
Kushites.
not the Dravidians. These are different people.
Dravidians were in part the earliest African people over there. The
Okay.
Dravidians are short, very woolly haired people. They're not, I mean, the people that are Dravidian speaking today range from kinky and woolly haired to straight haired, and there can be extremely black to very fair skinned. But
Hmm.
the original Indians, the original Indi, the original Jews and the Brahmins, according to ancient sources, were all black people, and they were connected to the Ethiopians, meaning the peoples of Nubia, as well as, see, the word India was used for Abyssinia. It was called Central India, uh,
Wow. Hmm.
and or middle. I forget if it was Middle India or Central India. Yeah, Middle India, I think, and Southern Arabia especially was called, or actually the whole area of the Arabian Peninsula was called India Minor.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
then you had a certain portion of Asia that was called, Greater India. But I mean, those people, the word Hind and Sind, those were originally
And
Hind and Sind were originally Arabian tribes, and
right.
India was called um, Bharata.
Hmm.
Not it wasn't called India, until I think the colonialists came there. But
Very interesting.
yeah, and you do find a lot of Tamil that are kinky haired, like
Hmm.
Sushila Rahman and a lot of the gurus over there that were Afros.
Interesting.
Yeah, and but a lot of people don't know that Indian people came over here in the United States as slaves, and I have people in my family too that are of well, they look like different parts of India, to tell you the truth, but one
Hmm.
hair is like down to their um, what do you call it, their knees almost.
Mhm. Mhm.
Grandmother and one of my cousins, and one of my cousins actually looks like you, which is interesting.
I
That's what
knew of that in the Caribbean, but I didn't know in the mainland, North
and that's
America.
what I'm talking about. The East Indians came over here and were actually they started off as indentured servants, but they ended up as slaves, and then they were free. They came over here later than a lot of the Africans, but
Okay.
not
Okay.
only them, but Chinese came over here and were classified as Negroes as well, or people from East Asia, and that's why you find, for example, Judith Jameson. What's her name? Jameson, the astronaut. When she got her DNA done, then she thought she was Indian, but it turned out she was like part Japanese or something, or some something like that. People came
Yeah.
from Polynesia. People came,
Yes.
yeah. So yeah, we came from all over Madagascar, and they all came to be called Negroes. But yeah,
Yeah.
those were Wadabi actually, Wadabi women. See how they're wearing the purple dye? The purple dye is also called Getulian.
Like the
Getulian,
Tuaregs. Mhm.
yeah, that's called Getulian dye because that was the name of the ancient Numidian people, or it's called Phoenician, the Phoenician dye.
Is that the dye that comes from, is it some sort of a crustacean that they
Yeah,
get that dye from?
yep.
Ah. Hmm.
It's made in the Gower area I was talking to you about in Transjordania, which is the area of the Phoenicians, Jericho, and the Canaanites, or some of the Canaanites lived there, as well as the Tuareg and Fulani who also wear these.
I'm also a kind of
Yeah.
a food anthropologist too. I've noticed that, um, well, my first husband was from Ethiopia. He was from the Hatter tribe, but the Amhara have a certain bread that's called injera. You know, that spongy
Also in
sour
Arabia,
bread.
it's called injera, or was called injera.
And where?
Arabia.
In Arabia as well. Yes. That in Yemen, they also have the same bread.
Yeah. This is
And all of that food ties people together too, because you can see the history through that. You carry your foods with you too.
right. Early, or these are, colonial. It's a colonial picture of the Arabs, and it says, this book says, see if I can find it. Arab peasants still wearing clothing it says similar to the biblical peoples, but that's a biblical
Mhm.
book I was looking at. So
Mhm.
a lot of the Arabs, look still like this. And the Central
Mhm.
Arabia as well, especially the Jews in Najran,
Mhm.
who were from the Bel Harith ibn Kab. And they were supposed to be they probably were the earliest and last of the Jews, or last of the Jews in Arabia. Um, this is Morocco, Marrakesh, Yemen,
Mhm.
Dahama. So again,
Fascinating.
Dahama is the area of Canaan as well as Cush, which were
And Kush.
mentioned in the Bible next to each other. That's why they're
Mhm.
mentioned next to each other. So nobody ever talks about that. They're basically one and the same people. Same thing, men of Zabid. I
Mhm.
was trying to find the area where I'm just going to go to another volume album. I was trying to find the area in Zabid or a picture of the Zabid Arabs, men dancing with the white bands around their heads. Because
Mhm.
how the
Oh, the Moors
yeah, that's how the Moors
connection.
described. Yeah,
Okay.
it's also, like I said, it was born among the early peoples of Siwa, the Berbers of Siwa.
We
Uh,
see a lot of that on a lot of those European heraldry, the crests.
yeah,
See the Moors with the
yep,
headband.
yep.
Hmm.
Um, Interestingly, they just found early Christian tombs had figurines of these Black African looking people that they're trying to say were Black Africans brought to the region. When I
Slaves, right?
Yeah, probably. So this is the Arad region, Tel Arad, I guess that's in Israel, and they were probably early Arabs, early
And
Arabian.
Arad, where is that?
Arad or Tel Arad, I think it's
Tell
in Israel.
in Israel.
What is now called Israel? Yes, yeah,
Yeah, what is now called Israel.
yeah. As you see, the ancient Sabians
Oh,
look
yeah, is it Ethiopian?
looks
Hmm.
just like Ethiopians, yeah. And
Yes.
that's where the Ethiopians, a lot of them came like I said, back into Arabia. I mean, back into Africa from Arabia.
Back into
Yeah,
Africa. Yeah.
especially the Amhara probably and the Semitic, so-called Semitic
Hmm.
Ethiopians,
Hmm.
the Tigray, Tigrinya, and a lot of the Muslims too. I mean, they were not even they came even later.
Yes. You know what's interesting? I'm not sure if you've delved into the DNA as well, because that's very telling.
Yeah.
But I did had my son's DNA done. You know, his father did
Hmm.
his Y, and I'm thinking, okay, his father is from Ethiopia. There's going to be a lot of Syrian mixture, a lot of Turkish, maybe Greek, right?
Hmm.
That boy is 98% African. All of the Ethiopia, I mean, that tells you that that phenotype is African.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from anywhere else, and it's original. It's not through mixing.
You find it mainly among the or Omatic people in Ethiopia.
Mhm.
Um, what happened was the early Greeks settled in Ethiopia in places like Axum and other places, as well as in the Red Sea area, and that's where you get some of this, and as well as the Persians, the Scythians also settled in Ethiopia and Ethiopians absorbed these other, non-African peoples. But
Mhm.
yeah, and that's where the longish hair comes from. These are actually the Tubu Gorain of Libya. The people that, yeah, Tripoli, looks like Tripoli. The people that Gaddafi had been working with, to protect Gorain or the Koran, which is in the Bible, they're called Koran too. One of the Horite groups.
And is that Korain or Horain? That's H?
Actually, no, it's K, usually K or G or Q. Depends,
Ah, okay.
yeah, depending on
Korain.
the translator. Koran, yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's also the name of a place in I think, Jordan too.
Yeah.
So,
And you know, you mentioned earlier about the languages, and I've been studying ancient Hebrew, and
oh,
it's so fascinating at how many words are exactly the same as the Adari language, you know, of my children's father, and Arabic. There's so many that are just identical, if not just slightly different.
because they're the closest people related to Hebrews.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Ethiopian Semitic is closely related to the ancient Tahama dialects. And
Hmm.
that's actually the Yasran tribe. A lot of these people were the Hebrews and were the Israelites, not
Hmm.
just Hebrews, but Israelites.
Right.
This is just another, oh, this is Sonic, man, actually. That's
It
an,
seems politically people are diced up and separated and categorized
so I
more
meant,
than they really need to be because they were the same people.
yeah. Well, like I said, Europe has tried to, and the different nationalists have tried to usurp these people into their own, heritage, when in fact,
Mhm.
for example, the Lemba of, what is it, Central South Africa,
Zimbabwe, yeah.
yeah, are closer related to the Kohan than the modern European Kohens.
Right,
So,
right. The DNA is
and they,
it's
yeah,
wiping away the lies.
and the
Yeah.
and they claim to come from Sena, which is the name of a tribe of Judeans in the Bible, Senaa.
Hmm.
If you look at it, it's
Hmm.
also the name of a place in Hadramaut.
Hmm.
There's the Mahra, also located on both sides of the Red Sea in Oman and Hadramaut, as well as in Somalia. But these are the ones from Oman.
Oh, that's Oman. Okay.
Mahra was a tribe of Kude. Like I said, the Kude were the early Judean peoples, unquestionably.
Hmm.
This is a tribe of Al Amran, or the girls from this father over here. And Amran was actually the name of the son of, what was it? Sorry, brother of Moses and the father of Moses in Arabic sources. And these people claim to have come from Amr
Hmm.
Muzaikia and his wife Zarifa, who is Zipporah in the Bible.
Sephora. Okay.
The Jerusalem is Dar es Salaam in next to a small town near Sana'a. It's not, the later Jerusalem or the
And this is in Yemen.
yes, almost all the places I'm talking about, especially related to where is it? She's Dravidian, but like I say, a lot of Dravidians are not straight-haired.
Right.
Are actually, very much, and some of them look more Ethiopian than like this person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically, a lot of the people in Hadramaut and Aden and places like that in what's now called Yemen, or very small people, small built people, diminutive in size, like the ancient Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize, and the Beja people, a lot of them are like this too. People,
Very small.
people of Khaybar were like this too, the original Jews of Khaybar, and you find that same type in Russia. Small, woolly-haired
In
people.
Russia as well.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and in Ukraine. I
Mm-hmm.
should say Ukraine. It's not Russia
Mm-hmm.
anymore. Not,
Ukraine.
yeah.
Here's
Uh,
a question for you. And kind of going back to the European tip as well, but there's a lot of history in the fact that many of these European dynasties, the ruling families, there
mhm.
seems to be Negro blood at the root of it. Now, would you would you say that that would be because of the Moors being in Europe for nearly 900 years, or do you think it's something that was previous to that?
I think it was probably more related to the Moors because some of it's been traced, and if you look at, like, for example, Queen Charlotte
Yes.
and her roots in the Moors, they were intermarrying among themselves. So obviously, there's going to be some atavistic connection. But
Hmm.
sure, her family came through Germany, and so did, if you look at Lady Blavatsky,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
her hair, well, they came from the same group of people.
There's the same stock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Germanic nobility. So the
Right.
whole group had, I guess, kinky blonde hair or whatever. I don't know.
Yes, that kinky
Yeah,
blonde hair in
yeah,
Germany.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it probably was due to the Moorish influence. I mean,
Hmm.
and a lot of the Europeans aren't ashamed of it. It's just the Americans being racist that
Yeah.
have always been, oh, it couldn't be Negro. you know,
It's okay. The cat is out of the bag.
all
You
even the
can't put it back.
even the Olmecs wearing cornrows in their heads on top of the
Yes.
earliest pyramids.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. We were everywhere.
yeah.
Hmm.
But the Gnawa, for example, the Jainawa also are Malink people or Soning peoples. They were the
Okay.
original rulers of Ghana that fell under the Tuareg influence. So the name Gnawa or Jainawa is also found in Berber genealogies. Jaina was a descendant of Canaan, and a descendant of actually related to Goliath and stuff like that. But Gnawa or Jainawa is also the root of the word Guinea.
Guinea.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, and
Okay.
a lot of the Sonink and related Malink peoples occupied the Guinea coast, which became known as the Slave Coast, and they came over to America, uh, bringing banjo and all kinds of things that a lot of people
That's right.
are ashamed of. But
No, no.
yeah, the Ganawa are these people that were, when they said the Berber, that the Negro was the Berber, ancient Berber in American documents, that's who they were talking about. Ganawa,
Mhm.
Malink, Sonink, all these people that settled along the Guinea coast and came over to Africa. Now, the Guinea coast, that refers to, well, could refer to anything from the Upper Volta or Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast and, not Nigeria. A lot of that, the whole area was, those were the most, probably one of the most populous people in West Africa.
Mhm.
Sonink, Malink, whatever. Those are
Fascinating.
more, more, oh, this is Aden, okay.
Mhm. There's more and more research. They're actually finding Paleo Hebrew here. They've seen things that look Egyptian in the Grand Canyon. What do you think about that? About, Moorish and Afro-Asiatic influence in pre-Columbian America? I mean, the thought of it is okay, it's before the slave trade. What route do you think they would have taken? Would they have come all the way to West Africa, like in Mauritania, Morocco, or would they have gone through Asia? And what do you think?
I think, well, I know the later movements of the Malink, who are called the great navigators of the world, actually probably came across the Atlantic somehow, or maybe they by accident, I don't know. Now, I did go to, when I was at Columbia, I went to a conference, and one of the Native Americans that was there was saying that, oh, the first people that came to us was a black man. He had been shipwrecked. So, and that was either, I think he was a Navajo or Hopi.
Okay.
One. Yeah, I forget which one. But he said, yeah, they had been shipwrecked. But which I found strange at the time, if not anymore. But
Right.
also, if you look at the Fijians who all claim to have come from East Africa, and if you look at the markings on the chins of the early Californians, Black Californians, and how they're the same markings of the Berber women today.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, they
Right
have
there.
yeah, and but both Black and the fair-skinned women have these markings, and yet you see the paintings of the early Native American women, or they look actually more like Berber women or Black women.
You know,
Yeah.
it's true. And these people who, well, I think they're Eurasian, the so-called Native Americans that they recognize today,
Uh,
but
no, no. Well, they're partly like they came over from early East Asia,
Mhm.
but then they were also here, the Solutreans, who were earlier Europeans that probably looked more like, I don't know, much older than, or just an archaic type of man. So, for example, my father, who was also part Native American, his hair never turned gray. He was near 90. His hair black as, actually blue black. For my aunt today, she's like in her 80s and her hair is pitch black. Wish I had her. But anyway, that was an older group of people, and they also, of course, mixed with Africans and if you look at all the early descriptions of the Native Americans, they're always described as mahogany and very dark.
Copper colored,
Yeah.
dark. Yeah.
So what people don't have to remember is there's been a lot of, since that period, since Europeans have come over here, a lot of them have mixed with Europeans.
Right.
Now, if we look at them as Eurasian in that way, okay, but yeah, the original natives were very dark, according to, like, from Virginia and all the way across Ojibwe, extremely dark skinned people.
Well, I was just going to say some of those very old books I've actually read, and I can't remember now. Maybe I'll pull it up and put it in the description. But that firsthand accounts spoke to three different phenotypes here. That you had the so-called Negro, you had the one that looked Asiatic, and you also had Caucasian-looking people here in America at that time. So
Well,
everyone was here, and I wonder, and just to finish that thought, that it makes me think of what we heard from Plato, and he talked about it Atlantis, where this area had everyone represented and everyone was living together in harmony.
well, I don't think of America as Atlantis, but
You don't think that the Atlantic Ocean, that there wasn't a connection there? A lot of that area looks like it fits
not
as a puzzle piece.
no, but I'm saying that the Atlantis that the ancient Greeks talked about
Mhm.
was considered Ethiopian, and it wasn't. Yeah,
Ah,
yeah, oh yeah, Pliny.
on the other end.
Yeah, but
Okay.
and Atl, if you look at Dr. Van Sertima's books, he talks about Atl and the use of that term Atl for the
Atoll.
connected somehow to the raising of civilization from swamps and stuff, and that could have been brought from something connected to people that came here. Not, but anyway, I'm not a specialist in that, but I do know that there were early. I did take courses from Dr. Vince Soderman, and I suggested that he create the book Golden Age of the Moor and stuff like that. And he did say that they had discovered Negroid skeletons about, I don't know if it was 14% among the early Olmecs or something like that. Or one of the early people. So yeah, there were definitely African peoples here from the earliest periods. And yeah, I don't think that Greek Atlantis was America. So, but that's just because of what I've learned about the Greeks. Other things they said about it. They even said that the Adites, they connected the Adites with the Atlanteans, the Adites of Arabia, meaning the huge, gigantic people that were living over there.
Yeah, it makes us think about even the map or the globe that we have. Is it, if you're going to change locations, are you telling the truth about where everything's situated? It just makes me wonder. Yeah. Wow.
Well, yeah, it definitely wasn't situated. I mean, like I said, Israel and Canaan were not situated where people have mostly thought it was.
Right.
Further south.
That's huge eye-opening.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so fantastic. I just, want to wind down. I don't want to keep you forever. I know it's a lot. But, if there's one thing with all of your research, Dana, you've spent a lot of time and energy, and there's just so much more that you have absorbed and learned, more than what you could ever convey, I bet.
Well, that's trying to get these books out and try to get
right. What do you think the most important thing for our people who are in the diaspora, who are in the process of decolonizing the mind? What's the most important thing for us to be aware of?
Well, I think that the most important reason for getting into this, or that the ancestors want us actually to learn about history, is to know the importance of the spiritual over materialistic, spirit over matter, and that there's everything in civilization. The creation of civilization was based on the knowledge of the cosmos with connection to our inner cosmos, like the chakras and the meridians and that kind of thing. So, for example, if you studied Kabbalah or even more mystical, like the tarot, which is just another form of the word Torah, and the astrology, it's just, you have to understand that these people, that was their science. Their science, not so much. It was, we consider it pseudoscience, or the Europeans consider it.
I don't.
But energy work and all this stuff, that was our impact on early civilization that was not carried over to these the European people, apparently, unfortunately.
I think they misunderstood it. I think they didn't know what they were looking at.
They might not have had the same abilities. I don't know.
Right.
Because if you go back in every culture, a lot of people are afraid of Black people because of certain mystical abilities that they had.
Right.
Today in Asia, and you go to Asia or the Philippines, they know that the Black people are the ones with the witches and the sorcerers or whatever. Same thing in Arabia. Sometimes that's basically generally. I guess that's where the Aladdin thing came from, the genie.
Oh yes.
Yeah. I don't
Magic
know.
carpets and all of those things.
And a lot of the hatred and fear of early Europeans about the Saracens, who were always described in earliest times as Black before the Kurds came into the picture, was that they were worshippers of the devil, and they sacrificed their kids to Satan. And I mean, unfortunately, some of these tribes did do that. No, I have to admit. But and even the sacrifice of animals and the bloodletting that's still done in Africa, a lot of this, and because it had spiritual power,
Mhm.
has spiritual power. It was scared Europeans, to the point
Right.
where when they brought them over as slaves, you know, they said, "Don't eyeball me, boy."
Hmm.
They knew what the power of the eye and the power of the mystic
Right.
practices, So
Right.
we lost, or I shouldn't say we, because I'm European too. I'm Middle
Yeah.
European, and most of African Americans are. I
Yes.
appreciate my European ancestry. Uh,
Yes. The whole of us, the
yeah,
whole being.
yeah.
It's important. Yeah.
But I do believe that the Africans were the founders of civilization, and that's what
Mhm.
the African ancestors have been trying to say to me.
Fascinating. See, this speaks through the blood.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think yes, it does. It's through
Hmm.
the ancestors, and I've had other European ancestors also, the Moors actually, come and tell
Hmm.
me about their Black ancestors. So
Hmm.
yeah, we're all connected in that way. That's why it's important for everybody to learn about their ancestors, no matter who they were.
Right. And and as we were saying too, it's an important thing to not push away or disown any part of you.
Yes. Hmm.
This is so important. I've heard that with a lot of Afrocentric belief that,
Right.
if I could cut that white part out of me. And it's like, no, that's part of who you are.
That's
And we have to remember that the creator makes no mistakes. What do you think about the fact that, here we are, we're funneled into America, and we are this wonderful modge podge of all peoples,
right. Exactly.
right? What do you think that's about?
We're headed for a more paradisiacal place, a place, we're going to evolve more towards the heaven on earth
Mhm.
promise of America, and I also think though that like I say, a lot of people don't know that early Southerners or modern Southerners actually have a lot of African ancestry, or not a lot, but they have African ancestry. They have
Mhm.
of all the other groups of Europeans here, they have the most. It's been found like almost all of them have African ancestors, recent
Mhm.
recent African ancestors, and there's some kind of karma, that's been going on. I don't know if it was, between because Moors went up into Europe, and they,
Mm.
of course, they made people slaves, and
They did some damage too. Yeah.
yeah, and they also
Mhm.
brought millions of Europeans into the Sahel and Agadis and other places. It's in the
Yes.
narratives, slave
Hmm.
narratives. And
Yeah.
some kind of karma that had to be worked out.
It had to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I see the same way, again, with that whole idea of, oh, I want to cut out that part of me or I hate that part of me. We have to recognize that, wait a minute, just because, someone is so-called black
right.
doesn't mean that they're good and they're golden.
Yeah.
And just because someone is white or whatever race doesn't mean that they're all wicked.
Right.
You know, we have to, look at that part that I think that we show up in whatever this 3D spacesuit is. Right now I'm in this spacesuit. It looks like this with this kind of hair, and it's for a purpose. It's
Right.
for my soul's development,
Learn, yes.
right? That I couldn't get if I didn't look
Learn
like this.
and ethnic groups, and there's different, genders.
Exactly.
And so
Mhm.
it's good to appreciate and try to evolve, learn about that,
All of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, yeah, when we look back at what the Arabs when I'm saying the Arabs, I'm talking about Black Arabs and the
Hmm.
Black,
Hmm.
Black Moors did, uh,
Hmm.
in terms of slavery, I said, not everything that we did was, or they did. I
It
should say.
wasn't good.
Yeah,
No.
that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
There is karma.
and
Mhm.
actually, they taught Europeans this slavery thing, you know? So,
Wait, the first people did everything first, the good
yes,
and the bad and the ugly,
exactly.
right?
Coming to a close. Yes, the karmic trend is, coming to the 360 degrees.
Hmm.
Turning. That's why you see what's happening today, I think, has a lot to do with what's going to happen, the
Yeah,
change. It's Judgment Day, and things are going to change.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, yeah. Well, this has been amazing and fantastic to speak to you. But I just thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show and to help in this awakening process. Things are unfolding, I mean, by the moment. And
Yeah,
what you're bringing, this tip of Arabian, the Afro-Asiatic tip,
right, right.
this is opening the box. And you are so appreciated for it. But until next time, peace and blessings.
Thank
And
you so much.
remember, love like it's holy because it is.
Indeed.
Oh my goodness, what a journey. We have traveled through time, through testimony, and the threads of memory that refuse to be erased. I want to thank our guests for not just sharing information and wonderful images, but for offering a map. Yes, a map back to the voices, the migrations, the inheritances that many of us have been taught to forget, yet somehow still feel inside of us. Now, whether your roots trace back to West Africa, East Africa, Arabia, ancient Canaan, or the indigenous lands of the America, whether you feel connected to the Israelites, the Moors, or those whose stories have no written record, know this. Your memory is valid. Your curiosity is sacred. Your journey is yours. And you resonate with one or a combination of these journeys for a reason. Yeah. This podcast is here to make space for all of it, not to limit your truth, but to expand the possibilities of who you are. Keep seeking, keep listening, and keep reclaiming what was always yours. Remember, you don't have to take what they give you. Until next time, stay open, stay grounded, and stay unbound.
Yeah.